A fire whirl loomed before Chiron, but he looked at Amy with a completely different expression than the fear he had shown 5 years ago. Instead, he displayed confidence, as if there were no threat. He immediately began to recall the past, where thugs were extorting him, but before he could speak, Amy interrupted him. She nervously explained that it was all a misunderstanding. Amy adamantly insisted that she was not a depraved woman. According to her explanation, the thugs were the ones who wanted to strip Chiron. Chiron couldn't believe his ears. Could it be that she kidnapped him just to say such things? The protagonist guessed Amy's concern. Was she worried that he would spread rumors around the school about her misdeeds? The situation was already awkward enough. The protagonist offered a simple and concise solution, just an apology. However, what had happened couldn't be changed. So instead of making excuses, wouldn't it be better to apologize and end everything? The protagonist's words made Amy ponder. Her eyes showed panic. Was the person in front of her so sharp-tongued? He pointed out the right things about himself to make the other person feel embarrassed, then schemed to gain an advantage for himself. But this game was not one where only Chiron could take the upper hand. Amy acted more assertively than what the protagonist suggested. If she apologized to him, there was no reason to believe that he would just accept her apology and not backstab her later. There was no real trust between them. If she simply apologized, it would be like admitting her past wrongdoings. The protagonist felt that girls were becoming harder to understand. Did she have to gain something from an apology? An apology is a minimum courtesy to someone she had hurt, not something she did for benefit. Amy still didn't concede to the protagonist. She continued to act tough. It seemed he didn't understand how the world worked. She felt secretly pleased with another attack. Because of her competitive nature, she spoke arrogantly and continuously. If she didn't gain anything, she had no reason to put in the effort. It seemed that the model student image was just an act, and her true vile nature remained. She continued to threaten the protagonist about certain things at the academy, one of which was not to mess with the seniors. If he was ostracized by an upperclassman, not only would all the seniors become his enemies, but his classmates would too. And of course, if it were revealed that he was a commoner, he would likely be expelled from the academy. The game had been turned around. Perhaps Amy had found Chiron's weakness. Amy would test his silence. And from now on, bring me coffee every day, I'll check your trustworthiness through these tasks. Chiron still didn't understand why he had to do these things. But Amy kept threatening, saying, I heard you were specially admitted here. A commoner can advance this far, it must be hard. Wouldn't it be sad to be expelled? Finally, Chiron agreed to Amy's childish demands. If he could prove his trustworthiness through trivial tasks, he would do it. Amy, hearing this, immediately showed satisfaction. And if you dare tell the teachers, I will drag you down with me. After saying that, Amy flew away, leaving the protagonist in amazement. The protagonist reassured himself. This seemed better than being expelled. It appeared her abilities were excellent, though he felt it was unfair to do everything she wanted. Indeed, it was difficult from the start. The scene transitioned to the next day. In the library, it seemed everyone was gathering and focusing their gaze in one direction. That gaze was directed precisely at our protagonist. As requested, Chiron had brought coffee for the arrogant Amy. Amy was still very haughty, her head held high. Her orange-haired friend was equally surprised. Amy, still cold, elegantly brushed her hair aside and snatched the coffee cup. Her orange-haired friend was surprised and reminded her that Amy didn't say thank you. Amy hurriedly said, we have to go to class now. There's no time left. Receiving such an attitude from Amy, the protagonist's face turned red, while those around him, knowing nothing, kept speculating. They thought he had just confessed to Amy, but she left without saying anything. How pitiful. Meanwhile, Amy felt extremely pleased. With this, he would be classified among those secretly admiring her. And if the protagonist tried to call Amy Karmas a perverted bully, people would refute it. What could be sweeter than revenge? Amy suddenly felt unusually exhilarated, as if all her worries from the past 5 years had vanished. Meanwhile, Chiron felt the heavy atmosphere surrounding him. He confirmed to himself, this is bullying. If trapped in negative thoughts, he would be the only one suffering. Therefore, Chiron decided. If he had to do it, he would do it perfectly. 10 days later, Chiron continued to bring coffee for Amy. Everyone remained very interested and focused on this coffee delivery story. A pure, romantic tale at the Magic Academy continued for 10 consecutive days. Amy was still standing at the door while he approached to hand over the coffee to that weirdo Amy. She was happily gloating. It seemed like the number of onlookers had increased. With so many people around, everyone must know by now. Should I slowly bring this to an end? The orange-haired girl, very curious, asked, Amy, when do you plan to accept Chiron's feelings? Amy was unexpectedly surprised upon hearing that. According to Sariel's observations, there were a lot of rumors, but in reality, Amy wouldn't even glance at others. Yet, she always accepted coffee from Chiron. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the birth of the Academy's legendary couple. This was something Amy never anticipated when she started this. The male protagonist handed Amy a cup of coffee. Everyone was chanting in unison, "Agree, agree." The protagonist spoke gently, "This time, I didn't spill a drop of coffee, right?" Suddenly, Amy was put on the spot, her face turning red with anger. The pressure from the crowd made her furious, causing her to spill the coffee. Witnessing this, everyone was astonished. The annoying Amy yelled, "Do you think I'll fall for you just because you give me this? You're a student who doesn't study and keeps trailing after female students. Stop giving me these things." Sariel saw Amy's overreaction and quickly apologized to Chiron. Everyone was discussing the harsh rejection the protagonist faced. Seeing the protagonist sit down to pick up the spilled coffee made those around him feel sympathetic. However, Chiron didn't feel that way at all. He was quite pleased. The scene shifted to that night in the library. Amy was slumped over the table, full of frustration. Initially, she just wanted to torment Chiron, but now everything had blown out of proportion. But that wasn't the most important thing. Amy could see through memories, a skill from the Karmas family that allowed her to record everything she experienced. She remembered every detail about the protagonist since the first day he brought her coffee for 10 consecutive days. She noted how Chiron looked while doing those chores. He seemed very enthusiastic on the first day, but on the second, third, fourth, and so on, until the 10th day, Amy noticed that his eyes hadn't changed at all, not even his pupils. What did that mean? According to Amy's understanding, no matter how much someone tried to hide their emotions, they couldn't conceal their true feelings in their eyes because the autonomic nervous system couldn't be controlled. If he could control his gaze, he could control his emotions like a robot. Or he was extremely sincere. Just then, Sariel, worried about Amy, asked if she felt guilty about Chiron's coffee. But Amy immediately dismissed it all. Soon after, Amy left the library. Her body felt exhausted, her legs weak, and her mind was filled with thoughts. As she walked, another student, Jake Ardius, blocked her way to talk. He was leaning against the wall, saying, "I thought I had to wait until midnight for you." Quickly, he pulled out a high-quality Western coffee. "Amy, you deserve the best." Still, Amy didn't understand. This guy kept babbling, "You see, I'm trying to win your heart, unlike that sissy guy." And of course, Amy bluntly rejected this pompous guy. She knew he had a group always trying to bring her down. The more he talked, the darker his face became, as if she'd hit a nerve. He began threatening her, saying the Karmas family's power was worthless. Amy wasn't afraid of anyone. She even mocked him with a comparison, "Yes, that look is indeed from a terrible guy. Unlike Chiron, your eyes look like dead fish eyes." Hearing this comparison struck his pride. A noble with a prestigious lineage compared to a weakling. He declared that in just one day, the weakling wouldn't be able to use magic anymore. He messed with the wrong person. Amy immediately knocked the coffee cup from his hand. Instantly, her four-way formation locked onto the pompous guy. Her gaze exuded a deadly aura never seen before. However, if Jake Ardius made any move, Amy would undoubtedly blow up the place. But a wise man knows when to retreat, so Jake Ardius quickly made his escape with a furious look. Amy, left alone, could only laugh with satisfaction. It had been a long time since she had been so agitated. But then she questioned herself, why did I do that? Was it because he threatened me? Or because he knew my secret? Suddenly, Amy remembered the image of the protagonist. However, she quickly dismissed that thought. A few days later, a gentle breeze created by Amy had unintentionally stirred up a storm. Her friend Sariel had an anxious face. A letter had been opened. "I've captured Chiron. Come to the 16th training center at 6 o'clock tonight before I finish him off. If you dare tell the teachers, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Back to 30 minutes earlier. At that time, Sariel and Amy were walking down the street when someone blocked their way to ask questions. Immediately, Amy cursed him out and ignored him. He handed over a piece of paper with a haughty tone, but the two ladies didn't care and walked away. Trying to get Amy's attention, he said, "If you don't want anything to happen to your man, you should accept this." Suddenly, Amy rushed back and snatched the paper from his hand. Upon reading the letter, she discovered that Chiron had been kidnapped. He had once said, "I'll make sure he can never use magic again." "Jake, you bastard," Amy muttered before crumpling the letter and shouting decisively, "So what? What does his matter have to do with me?" Sariel was surprised to see the letter crumpled, while the messenger remained indifferent. Sariel read the letter and exclaimed with concern, "The black mages are the villains who bully outstanding students." Amy was also deeply troubled. She knew she had retaliated against that scoundrel Jake because she couldn't hold back that day. Sariel, being kind-hearted and gentle, immediately thought of informing the professor. Hearing about reporting to the professor, Amy pondered deeply. It was the right thing to do, but it wouldn't be that simple. If a council of professors got involved, during the investigation, they would have to disclose the relationship between Chiron and Amy's past would be exposed. They would find out that he was a commoner. After all, Amy was thinking comprehensively, constantly recalling their conversations and meetings. It must have been tough for a commoner like Chiron to make it here. If he had to drop out, all his efforts would go to waste. The protagonist values keeping his identity secret so much that he agrees to Amy's condition. Because of all this, Amy decided to go alone to the Black Mage's hideout. Back in the present, that was why Sariel was so frantic. Chiron also understood why Amy decided to go alone. It was to protect their secret. This made Chiron feel grateful. So he decided to go there too. But how long would it take to get there on foot? So Sariel would go with Chiron. Suddenly, the protagonist felt a considerable surge of power, a dazzling yellow light. His arm turned a strange yellow color. The light was so strong that it could accelerate their movement rapidly. The protagonist couldn't believe how quickly they were moving. In an instant, they arrived at a forest. As soon as he landed, he felt nauseous and called out for Amy. But strangely, there was no one there. The protagonist guessed that they had changed locations. Since the address in the letter had been revealed, they must have avoided the teacher's eyes. The protagonist then told Sariel, "You should go back and report this to the professor. If you return alone, it'll be much quicker, and all of this is my fault." Sariel, hearing this, was even more confused about their relationship. But she realized that lives were more important. As soon as Sariel left, Chiron breathed a sigh of relief. Mountains were familiar terrain for him. A blue light suddenly appeared, and the protagonist's spirit zone seemed to manifest strongly. He began to sense traces of footprints. Following these footprints, the protagonist reaches a cave entrance. The footprints of two people were still fresh but stopped midway. Suddenly, a crackling sound echoed, startling the protagonist. A fire was blazing in front of him. Still, in the forest, some thugs were continuously threatening Amy. Amy, annoyed by their constant nonsense, showed her irritation. The smoke the protagonist saw earlier was caused by a flash grenade they had set off. They were descending slowly, taunting Amy provocatively. Seeing these kids only made her feel exasperated. Getting to the point, Amy asked where Chiron was. Instead, they tricked her, saying Chiron wasn't there. They thought they had tricked Amy into their trap, but little did they know this was her chance to unleash her full power. Wherever Amy went, flames followed. The thugs immediately fell to the ground, burning, their arms and mouth screaming in pain. They quickly scattered, but Amy's spirit zone targeted them relentlessly. No matter how far they ran, they couldn't escape her power. Her spirit zone grew stronger, forming an endless vortex. Amy's eyes gleamed with a murderous light. However, no matter how powerful her skills were, there were always weaknesses. Jake, thinking strategically, focused on creating a new tactic, Wind Blade. He thought he could overwhelm Amy with this move. But facing the Wind Blade, Amy remained calm. She reached out, grasping her opponent's strategy, and countered with a fire attack to eliminate Jake. After finishing, Amy walked away nonchalantly, lecturing the fool, "You're always wasting time on these useless things, and that's why your grades are so terrible." But they didn't come unprepared. Amy's eyes gleamed with fierce determination as a sudden purple light appeared, piercing through her body repeatedly. Her screams echoed through the forest. The thugs surrounding Amy laughed gleefully, having subdued the annoying Amy. This was anti-magic, a force that prevented mages from using their powers. Her hand seemed paralyzed, while a whirlwind tried to bind her. Seeing Amy weakened, the thugs felt more triumphant than ever. Jake raised a sharp knife, threatening Amy as he moved closer, taunting her with each step. Amy, feeling exhausted and remembering the bullying the protagonist endured years ago, finally understood his feelings. "Stop!" The loud shout froze everything. Amy recognized the voice, it was familiar. The protagonist had arrived. Without hesitation, he immediately activated his spirit zone, but lacking any magic abilities, Chiron decided to rely on his swordsmanship. Determined, the protagonist charged forward. But then, that strange purple light reappeared, causing him to collapse to the ground. His helpless fall deeply worried Amy, while the thugs felt victorious. Seeing the protagonist in a dire state, Amy shouted for him to deactivate his spirit zone. Chiron struggled as the anti-magic surrounded him. His senses seemed to drift away, shattering like glass. He suddenly remembered Professor Athela's advice, a mage must maintain focus to survive in a chaotic battlefield. The defensive mode was meant to prevent the spirit zone from collapsing under disruptive forces. Determined, he decided to shift his spirit zone to a defensive mode. This thought helped Chiron slowly regain control of his body. His arm started to move, surprising the thugs. They increased their power, but Chiron's defensive spirit zone began to reflect the purple energy at them. The thugs finally succumbed to Chiron's power, collapsing without resistance. Moments later, the spirit zone returned, and the anti-magic vanished. Amy was astonished by the strength of Chiron's spirit zone, a solid and icy force. Jake, however, was not ready to concede. He attacked again with his wind blade, but for a powerless Chiron, it was futile. This infuriated Amy, who struck Jake, knocking him to the ground. She continuously punched him, hurling insults. The protagonist hurried to stop her, pulling them both to the ground. Yet, Amy quickly got up and urged Chiron to leave before anyone saw them. Just as she finished speaking, a radiance appeared from somewhere. Amy hoped fervently, please, let it be an old, lenient teacher. Unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. A young, dedicated professor from the school arrived, Professor Thad and Sienna. He was trying his best to unleash a fiery spell. The true surprise was for the professor, seeing the thugs sprawled on the ground. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out. It was Jake. He stood up after the battle with the protagonist, saying, I believe I can explain everything to the teachers. Honestly, it was personal, so I requested a duel. This happens quite often at our age. But Professor Sienna, skeptical, replied, a duel? I heard there was a threatening letter involved. And I saw you use anti-magic, Jake. You know the Academy's rules, don't you? Jake, grinning maliciously, continued, I only used it because Amy is too powerful. I just used it as a countermeasure. But look at us, we're the ones who suffered the most. Besides, Amy broke the rules first by attacking me in the library. That's why I suggested a duel. Isn't it suspicious that Amy didn't report it to a teacher immediately? Hearing this, Amy's anger flared. You threatened me first in the library and wrote that you kidnapped Chiron, Amy retorted. Jake, still defiant, laughed and countered, but did we kidnap him? Today, he attacked us first. Also, seeing that Chiron didn't report it to the teachers but came here instead suggests you two are hiding something. This statement caused everyone to feel confused and made Amy furious, muttering curses under her breath. Jake seemed to be systematically revealing his malicious thoughts and schemes, which irritated Professor Sienna. She angrily exclaimed, Can you stop spouting nonsense, Jake? You and your friends used anti-magic. You know that Chiron's or Amy's minds could have been destroyed, or they could have even lost their memories. That's more than enough to get you expelled from this academy. Jake, clearly disrespecting Professor Sienna, laughed contemptuously. To him, money was everything. But Sienna, straightforward and no-nonsense, dismissed Jake's words with a sharp look. Her eyes glowed with a fierce intensity as she unleashed her power, sending Jake sprawling backward with a scream that echoed through the surroundings. Everyone who witnessed this scene was astonished. Jake remained paralyzed, unable to move, submerged in a state of helplessness. The power Sienna unleashed rendered him completely immobile, a testament to her precise control over her magic. Now the protagonist understood why she was called a genius mage. Sienna, using her power, continued to lecture Jake on manners. Do you think everything can be solved with money? We've known about your misconduct towards many students, but the academy hesitated to punish you. Schools aren't places where teachers teach you for money. We teach you lessons that money can't buy. These profound words from Professor Sienna left someone as shallow as Jake baffled. She continued earnestly, Isn't this what you once aspired to be? Don't you want to become a great mage? Her words seemed to awaken something in Jake. He remembered his past promise, If you promote me to the 5th year, I will become a great mage and repay you. Jake's eyes softened as he recalled his childhood dreams of becoming a magnificent mage. He bowed his head respectfully and apologized. Eventually, it was time for Amy and Chiron to be questioned. The professor asked, Chiron, why didn't you report this to a teacher immediately? The first thing you should have done is report it to a teacher, not rush to rescue an upperclassman. We can't consider that a valid explanation. Both Amy and the protagonist froze, contemplating the question. Amy finally spoke up, nervously, Actually, Chiron is my boyfriend. This revelation left everyone in shock. Rumors quickly spread throughout the school. Newspapers buzzed with headlines about the goddess Amy Karmas dating a new student. In reality, they were just pretending. The scene shifted to the training area for the intermediate class. Chiron, someone called out. The protagonist greeted them cheerfully, but it was just a brief interaction before he quickly returned to class. As Chiron stepped into the classroom, he barely had time to settle in when he was bombarded with taunts. Congratulations. You must be feeling pretty smug, huh? Coming to class just to flaunt your romance, aren't you? You don't have any skills. Did you get into the academy because of your looks? Because you spend all your time dating instead of studying, you know nothing about spells. These constant mockeries infuriated Chiron. The rumors that started 2 days ago about Chiron dating Amy naturally spread like wildfire. But they also discovered another secret: Chiron's grades hovered around 30. Everyone's eyes were filled with jealousy. It was an unjust envy towards a new student who seemingly had it all without effort. Sharing this sentiment, they formed a clique to isolate Chiron. Only the quiet girl with purple hair refrained from criticizing the protagonist. As Chiron entered, he felt an unusual, eerie silence. Step by step, he walked to his seat, and as class ended, he tried to ask his seatmate a question, only to be met with indifference. This deeply troubled Chiron. There was no need to ask why they were behaving this way. During the practical class in Spirit Zone practice, everyone focused on their respective fields. The protagonist's Spirit Zone was particularly large, causing discomfort to others. A girl standing nearby felt irritated. Why is he practicing here? His Spirit Zone has touched mine. It's disgusting. His Spirit Zone is unnecessarily large. Just as the protagonist was performing his Spirit Zone, teacher Athela appeared and asked, "How's everything going?" Chiron struggled with materializing his Spirit Zone deviation form but managed well with the other types. His confident answer prompted the teacher to test his abilities further. She invited him to demonstrate his Spirit Zone skills. Fear crept into Chiron, a fear rooted in envy. Yet, with a steely resolve, he seized the opportunity. Chiron was the only student in Class 7 capable of converting all 4 modes of the Spirit Zone. The Class 7 students were visibly annoyed. He just wants to show off in front of his girlfriend. What else is he good at? Their negative remarks only strengthened his determination. Teacher Athela advised, try each mode one by one, transitioning through all 4. Mastery of Spirit Zone transformation was a criterion for advancement. Chiron thought, if I succeed, I might advance and escape this situation. Ignoring the chatter, he closed his eyes and immersed himself in his Spirit Zone. First, he expanded his defensive Spirit Zone, growing larger and larger, surprising even Amy. Then, he swiftly transitioned to an offensive mode, impressing the distant teacher. This student has a solid foundation. His speed in transitioning surpasses Class 7. At this level, advancing to Class 4 should be easy. Amid his performance, Chiron thought, though I want to showcase my success, to receive the professor's guidance, I must display my failures too. Intentionally, he faltered slightly. The Class 5 students watched closely. Oh, he's switching to deviate mode? Only Class 5 gets to try that. The key is shifting the Spirit Zone center before it fully retracts and vanishes. However, Chiron failed to maintain his consciousness while attempting the transition. This small error was noticed, and they mocked him relentlessly. What's he doing? Do you think he's a genius? Haha, so arrogant and embarrassed now, still standing there. This shook Chiron. His Spirit Zone wavered and began to break apart. He questioned, why do people take pleasure in others' failures? He felt out of place, but his thoughts were interrupted by another voice. You're overthinking. Just do what you want. Don't you want to become a mage? These words rekindled his resolve. I'm here to become a mage, he reminded himself. Fueled by this noble goal, he pushed his Spirit Zone to its limits, astonishing those around him. His Spirit Zone was now not only powerful but also impressively fast. The scene shifted to 2 professors having tea. Athela shared, Chiron successfully used the deviate mode for 4 seconds. To add excitement, Athela sought Sienna's assistance. A few days later, after a chemistry class for Class 7, the lesson ended early. The students cheered, but Sienna had a special announcement. Chiron will be promoted to Class 5 starting tomorrow. This announcement stunned Chiron, leaving him bewildered. The surrounding students buzzed with disbelief. It takes 2 years to advance 1 class. Which family is backing him to jump 2 levels? Sienna, after the announcement, advised the students to strive for such achievements. Suddenly, a student stood up angrily. There's never been a precedent for advancing 2 levels at once. This seems shady. Besides, why promote a student who can't use any spells? Sienna was taken aback. He can't use any spells? This revelation shocked Sienna. Another student slammed the table, declaring, this is unacceptable. It's favoritism. Didn't the teachers say the Spirit Zone isn't everything in magic? If Chiron can cast a spell, we might accept it. The other students agreed, if it's about spellcasting, we're confident we're better. Chiron can't keep up with theoretical lessons. If you insist on promoting him, we'll appeal to the student council and demand a hearing. Faced with this backlash, Chiron was frozen. Sienna calmly addressed the students, I understand your concerns. Perhaps I was hasty in my announcement. We'll officially notify you after a faculty meeting. The debate ended, and Sienna returned to her office, pondering the students' reactions. It wasn't just about fairness, there was emotional unrest. Maria entered and recounted the whole story to Sienna, from start to finish. After hearing it, Sienna delved deeper into the issue, contemplating the underlying emotions. Back to Chiron, it took him quite some time to immerse himself in the books. The library seemed deserted as he made his way home. Along the path, the protagonist walks leisurely, enjoying the moonlight and pondering the butler's advice. Once enrolled at the Academy of Magic, numerous nobles might look down on him, but regardless, he must endure. If he can hold on until the end, he will reap the sweet rewards. Motivated by the butler's words, the protagonist is determined to give his all, knowing that others have placed their trust in him. Switching scenes to the protagonist's home, after cleaning up, he steps outside, wondering who could be visiting so late. In his mind, he quietly speculates, who could it be? They speak up. Chiron, are you free? However, the protagonist's guess is off. It's Miss Sienna who appears. She had intended to see him earlier, but he wasn't in his room. She apologizes for bothering him at this hour. Sienna takes a look around the room, observing Chiron's cards and notes, noticing something. She examines his grades and the surrounding papers. Despite his low marks, all subjects are evenly scored. It seems like he's been striving to broaden his knowledge in all areas rather than achieving short-term results. He studies for the future. It's not that he can't learn magic, he's chosen not to. Yet Sienna is curious why he's doing this now. Could it be because he wasn't allowed to go to school when he was young? Eventually, the two confide in each other about Chiron's inner struggles, about his complex current relationships. He chooses to face them with his true self. Even though all the students in Class 7 say Chiron is wrong, in the end, they are just 40 individuals. Chiron believes that somewhere in the world, there will be someone who can understand him. Hearing this, Sienna understands Chiron's intentions and promises to keep that in mind during the upcoming meeting. Through this, many professors also come to understand Chiron's talent and agree to let him skip a grade, helping him avoid this bullying situation. However, Professor Thad immediately opposes this. An academy isn't just for nurturing geniuses. Doing so would be favoritism. The two of them immediately engage in an argument. Everyone feels helpless about their arguments as if this happens often. Their personalities are so opposites that it's hard to believe they could become magic sorcerers. The headmaster sees their argument and can only smile. Afterwards, he proposes an unexpected solution. Moving on to the next morning, all the students seem bewildered and excited as they rush to see what's happening. Everyone is curious about the notice board. The notice for the intermediate class summarizes that a promotion exam for Class 7 students will be held, and only one person will be promoted, skipping 2 grades from 7 to 5. This surprises everyone. But there's another issue: the exam requires an instant teleportation spell. This is a spell taught in Class 5, and a slight mistake could be fatal. However, gradually everyone begins to pay attention to the footsteps approaching. It's none other than the protagonist. His confidence is enough to overshadow everyone here. And today, it's all or nothing. See you in the next part. Peace.